If you want to buy some Bitcoin, there is a very special time of the year where you can maximize profits in a very short period of time. And it's coming very soon. During that time frame, Bitcoin has been consistently increasing by more than 10% in just 14 days. So in this video, I will show you what has historically been the very best time of the year to buy Bitcoin, as well as the very best time to sell Bitcoin and take profits. So to come up with the very best time of the year to buy and sell Bitcoin, what I did is to analyze the historical price of Bitcoin since 2015. So I analyzed and backtested all the possibilities, all the time to buy, all the time to sell to come up with the very best time. And at the end of this video, I will show you what is precisely the date that has historically been the very best time to buy and the very best time to sell Bitcoin. So the first thing is that when you look at this pattern here, when you look at the price of Bitcoin since 2014, you can see that it's a very cyclic market. You can see that Bitcoin increased and decreased, increased, decreased, etc. And you can find some patterns that tend to repeat over the years. And that's why it makes sense to look at what has historically been over the years the very best time, the very best months to buy Bitcoin, and the very best months to buy to sell Bitcoin, because it seems that history tends to repeat itself, and the times where Bitcoins tend to increase at a given year tends to be the same in the following year. So to come up with an answer to this question, what I did is to analyze the price variation of Bitcoin every year. And what I did is to break down the price of Bitcoin, its variation year by year since 2015. So on this plot, what I'm showing here, this is the average variation of Bitcoin broken down year by year. So each year come with a different color. So every year we start on January 1st. So every time at the beginning of the year, we start at 0%. And then every year, we look at what's the variation of Bitcoins since January 1st of that year. So you can see that every year obviously behaves differently. The price of Bitcoin every year can trend in different direction. Overall, most of the year, Bitcoin tends to increase and end up at the end of the year with a variation, with a positive variation, where the price of Bitcoin has increased. There is only 2 years here where the price of Bitcoin finished the year lower than it started. But then when you look at those years, you tend to see some general patterns that again tend to repeat themselves over the years. And one way to see those patterns is to look at what has been the average. So what I did is to look at the price of Bitcoin every year and take the average over all of those years. So this is what is shown in black here. In black, this shows the average variation, average over all the years since January 1st of each of those years. And what you can see here is that there is some general trends here. So first, usually Bitcoin tends to stay relatively flat during the first month of the year until about February, where you tend to see some slight increase, then it remains flat again. And then you start to see, on average, a slow gradual increase of Bitcoin in spring and summer. And then again, the price tends to dip in around September, and then usually the price tends to increase a lot, then to explode in the months of October and then November, and then it tends to drop again in the late year during the months of December. So this is a general pattern. And if you look at this really months by months here, so what I did in this table is to summarize for every year and every month, so for all the combination, what has historically been the variation of Bitcoin between the first day of the month and the last day of the month. And here on this table, in the last line, I'm showing the average percentage variation of Bitcoin average over the year, month by month, to show what has been the average variation of Bitcoin in January, in February, in March, etc. And again, here you can see some general patterns that tends to repeat themselves. So if you look at the months of January, March, and September, you can see that those months are very often red. It means that most of the time in January, most of the time in March, and also in September. Most of the time Bitcoin end up finishing the months at a lower valuation than at the beginning of the months. So when you look at the average variation during January, the average variation is about -1%. In March, it's about also -1%. And September is historically the very worst month for Bitcoin, with an average variation of almost -4%. But on the other hand, there are some months where historically Bitcoin has been performing very well. And when you look at those months, so February is historically a very good month. On average, Bitcoin tends to increase by 12% in February. And if you look at the previous month of February, there is only 2 years, in 2020 and in 2025, where Bitcoin ended up decreasing in February. All the other years, Bitcoin systematically increased in February. Same thing for October. October has historically been the very best month for Bitcoin, with an average appreciation of plus 16% in just 1 month. And again, when you look at the month of October, it's mostly green. There's only 3 years, in the very first year in 2014, in 2018, and in 2025, where Bitcoin has been decreasing. But every other year, Bitcoin has been in green, and the price has been fairly systematically much higher at the end of October as compared to the beginning of October. So now, based on those results, what I did is to try to simulate, by doing some extensive backtesting, to see what is the very best date of the year to buy Bitcoin and the very best date to sell Bitcoin. So what I did is to write a function here that just tests historically, based on historical data, all the possibilities, all the buy and selling times, to see what is the one that has been performing the best over the years. And so here are the results. So here what I'm showing in this table, those are the top 5 periods of the year where you can generate the maximum gains. So here the objective that I used during this backtesting was to find the time of the year to buy and the time of the year to sell Bitcoin, with the goal of maximizing the median daily return. The goal here is to find a period of the year where you can maximize the overall return, and to achieve this return in the shortest period of time, in the minimum number of days. And so one way to look into this is to calculate the average return per day, which is going to be higher if your return is increasing, and also going to be higher if the period of the time where you realize this gain becomes lower. So the faster you make those gains, the higher it's going to be in this table. So what you can see here is that historically, there are some very clear patterns here. Historically, buying in the middle of July and selling in the end of July, for example, buying in July 12 and selling in July 28, has historically been a very good way to realize some quick profit. So if you buy in July 12 and sell in July 28, this is just a period of 16 days. So just in 16 days, you would realize an average return of about 9%. So the median per day return during that period of the time historically has been about 1.1%. So the median increase every day for Bitcoin during this period of time is more than 1%, which again compounds over time, and eventually, on average, by buying systematically during this period of the time, you would realize an average return of 9% systematically in a period of just 16 days. But the very best time here, like the best period of the time, is to buy on October 19 and to sell on November 2nd. So this is a period of just 14 days. And during this period of 14 days, the median per day return is 1.11%. So systematically, the return daily for Bitcoin has been very good during this period of late October until early November. So during this period of the time, if you had bought the Bitcoin every October 19 and sold Bitcoin just 14 days later every November 2nd, on average, your return would be 10.56%. Just in 14 months. And this has been a pattern that has been repeating itself over and over. So there you have it. The very best time historically, based on the historical price action of Bitcoin, is to buy on October 19 and to sell in November 2. So if you prefer to, rather than buying on this very specific time of the year, if you prefer to spread your risk and have a more conservative approach, then your best strategy is simply to dollar cost average Bitcoin. So simply to buy, for example, every week a fixed amount of Bitcoin with a fixed amount in dollars, and to systematically do that every week. And on average, you will get very good returns. But if you're going to dollar cost average Bitcoin, then you should also think of how you can optimize this. And in particular, there has been a very best time of the week, a very best day of the week, where you can dollar cost average Bitcoin and get the maximum returns. So if you want to find out what has historically been the very best day of the week to buy and dollar cost average Bitcoin, make sure to watch this video.